Hello, today I'm going to do a video on some sidemen who contributed to Beatles and solo Beatles records and a couple of Stones records, and examine whether they got recognition for what they did. I've got a few examples here, and it's really quite illuminating how some people got credit and some people didn't. I'm going to start off with Alan Civill's solo on For No One, which is perhaps the highlight of the whole song. And I don't think he was credited on the original Revolver album, at least on the pressing I was looking at. Correct me if I'm wrong. David Mason, similarly, the piccolo solo on Penny Lane from 1967 was not credited at the time and was a pretty integral part of the song. In contrast, Billy Preston, when he got together with the Beatles for the Let It Be sessions, they took the unprecedented step of actually releasing the Get Back single, and it was called The Beatles with Billy Preston. So his contribution to Get Back is obviously phenomenal. The keyboard solo, and also on I've Got a Feeling and Long and Winding Road, and he was one of the names mentioned on the Let It Be album. But at the time, you know, people didn't go in for like track by track analysis and giving details of who played on what, so one was left to guess what he played, but one obviously knows that Billy Preston was a huge part of the Let It Be sessions and helped alleviate the tensions within the group. Now I'm going to mention Nikki Hopkins, who played the piano solo on Revolution, uncredited at the time. Whereas when he came to do his contributions to the Imagine album, there's a very detailed track-by-track listing of who played on which track, and his piano on Jealous Guy is a very distinctive part of that song, and rightly credited. Bobby Whitlock on All Things Must Pass, I'm not going to get into that controversy, I'm going to let it be for a while. But I want to say that he did play the keyboards on I Just Want to See His Face, a track from the Stones' Exile on Main Street. He was called into Olympia and went in and played keyboards on that while Mick was scat singing, and didn't receive a credit on the album, which is a bit of a shame. George Martin, when he'd done, like, for example, the solo on In My Life, that was mentioned on the album sleeve, George Martin on piano, so that was good. Eric Clapton played a huge part in All Things Must Pass and went uncredited, and George was on record saying at that time the record companies didn't allow us to acknowledge that we'd played on each other's records, but I think it was more to do with money. The fact that Polydor or whatever company Eric was with would have demanded money, and so they thought it was easier just to leave his name off and not give him any credit at all. And then on the 2000 reissue, George finally comes clean and says, yes, Eric played guitar on most of the tracks. Whereas if one had bought that album at the time, one would probably assume, because Eric wasn't credited, that George played a lot of the solos, and he didn't. Or not all of them anyway. Brian Jones contributed sax from the Stones, by the way. Brian Jones contributed the sax to You Know My Name, Look Up the Number. Went uncredited. He died a couple of years later. Well, the song was released a year after he died, but the session that he played at was in 1967. And by the time the solo years came on, like when George Harrison contributed to John Lennon's Imagine album, he was given full credit, rightly so. George Martin did the orchestral arrangement for Uncle Albert from the Ram album, and for 50 odd years that was not known to the public until the deluxe version came out and they gave him his long overdue recognition. But I guess at the time Paul just didn't want to be associated with the Beatles, and so didn't want George Martin's name anywhere near that record, so left his name off. When Billy Preston contributed to the Stones in the 70s. He was credited, like on Melody, or the stuff he did on Black and Blue was credited. And when Dave Mason played guitar on Listen to What the Man Said, that was credited. Tom Scott, the sax solo on that song, also credited. So it's a bit funny that at the time, a lot of contributions were not recognised for one reason or another, and I think it's important that these bit players or support players or important contributors to the song are given their recognition, and that's one of the beauties of archive releases. Like when the Ram archive release came out, they finally gave George Martin credit, and I don't want to get into the All Things Must Pass controversy, so I won't. But I think one of the things archive releases require is a full acknowledgement of who did what on which songs. And some of these support players played an important part on the songs involved. And I noticed Billy Preston, for example, he played organ on I Want You, She's So Heavy for the Abbey Road album, which was not credited. So it's a little bit strange. What to do with the record company and what they could or could not do, but I think that's a pretty poor excuse. I think these players deserve the recognition for what they did, and that's important. Thanks for watching. See you next time.